Well, when you try to set up something, you have to realize things. And sometimes teams will make a name change because it makes sense. But sometimes you have to go with like the original name. And remember, when I look at the NBA, I mean, the New Jersey Nets were the Brooklyn Nets were once called the New Jersey Nets, which made a lot of sense. Ignore the cat in the background. I mean, the the names and places and all that, what happened. And, the Hornets, Pelicans debacle for New Orleans is like there was once called the New Orleans Hornets, now they're called the New Orleans Pelicans, and then Charlotte's team, the Bobcats, turned back into the Hornets. But of course, this team had one major name change that ended up creating such a controversial stir. But that wasn't done until 1996. Washington is known for, that football team being named, what, before they became the Commanders because of pressure. But Washington went through that too. The name's kind of weird because they think they're fast as a bullet, but unfortunately, gangland violence in Washington forced them to change the name. Anyway, let's talk about the 1976 Washington Bullet. We're playing basketball sims. We're playing basketball sims. He's playing what if NBA? Cutter's doing what if NBA? Yeah. Oh, all the teams around the world got to know that the Raptors are number one. But what about the Bulls, Wizards, and Pistons? They all have great what ifs. Stories about old teams like the Kansas City Kings and maybe even the Minneapolis Lakers. But we all know we're going to do some basketball. He's doing basketball. He's doing basketball. What ifs? Cutter's doing what if NBA? So what if NBA? So the Washington Bullets started out life in Chicago as the Siffers, and then that team really couldn't do anything. So they turned to Washington, the nation's capital, and basically made themselves the Bullets. Washington thought they were crafty and all that. You have basketball in the nation's capital. And the Capitol Center wasn't that bad, even though it was in Maryland. But, Washington, D.C. is not that big a place. Anyway, the Bullets were the Bullets, in a sense. And Washington had a decent team and all that. In 1975, they were supposed to roll over the Golden State Warriors, but unfortunately, they fell. Not only did they lose, they lost in four. Washington in 1979 were victimized by the Seattle Supersonics as the Sonics captured their first championship in the franchise. Washington got to the final. Washington would have some lean years in the 80s, and then in the 90s, not really much. Of course, Washington changed the name from the Bullets to the Wizards in 1986 because of the violence in Washington. Since then, Washington struggled. Like John Wall was a pretty good player, but then he just had to get involved in guns in the locker room with Jarvis Cretian. Washington were decent and all that. Paul Pierce had a game-winning bucket with them, but other than that, they're not really known for too much. Anyhow, so Washington aside, we're going to be talking about the 1976 team. So the 1975-76 Washington Bullets, it was their 15th season in the NBA and third season in Washington. They were actually in Baltimore, called the Baltimore Bullets, or called the Capital Bullets. So Washington knew what they were doing. In the 75 draft, they didn't draft anybody because if you look at the 75 draft, the team, Washington got players. But why did they not say that? Well, they did get Kevin Greavy first round from Kentucky. Other than that, when it was like 10th round and all that, everything it was a 10-round draft. So not really much. The 75 Bullets were just off their championship chances being ruined by Golden State. The Bullets had Dave Bing, a great player, former Piston, to Syracuse. Phil Chenier to Cal. Kevin Greavy, Clem Haskins, who would be a pretty good NCAA coach. The Big E, Alvin Hayes, who had time with Houston, now in Washington. Tom Clasco of Toledo. Tom Kropp. Mike Riordan from Providence. Leonard Wilt Robinson. Wes Unseld, big boy from Louisville. And Nick Witherspoon. In the regular season, they just missed out on the division title by one over Cleveland, which meant they missed a top two spot. Only 5 teams in each conference qualified because, there were only like 18 teams, whereas now there's 30. So what happened was that the fourth and fifth place teams would face each other in a best of 3 series to see who would move on, Philly or Buffalo. I think it was Buffalo who moved on. Yeah, Buffalo had a team. We'll talk about that when we talk about the Clippers. Anyhow, so Washington took third, and now they had to wait for Philly or Buffalo. The winner of that one would face Boston. Washington would have to face Cleveland. 3 versus 2, of course. Yeah, in a world where the Rockets and Jazz were in the Eastern Conference. So the Bullets had to bye and then would take on Cleveland. It was a tight series. But unfortunately, Washington narrowly got nipped by the Cleveland Cavaliers by 2 points. So Washington could not do anything about it. I know I didn't say much about the whole thing with the Bullet. So yeah, just gonna give you like the Chicago Packers and San Francisco Baltimore Bullets, and then for the Capital Bullets, and then changed to Washington Bullets. Rebranded as the Wizards. They played in 4 NBA Finals, winning in 1978. So that's impressive. Yeah, the West Suns. They were supposed to win the championship, but they couldn't do anything. And then they fired Casey Jones. So yeah, so that's what you got. Anyway, what would happen if Washington got to the conference finals? So we have the 76 Bullets versus the 76 Celtics, because everyone knows that the Celtics not only won the Eastern Conference, they won the NBA Finals. So Washington would face Boston in best of 7, as you are. Game 1 sees Boston win 116-101. Havlicek stole the ball 3 times and got 30 points. 21 points for Phil Chenier, 20 from Alvin Hayes, 17 from Bing, 11 from Riordan, 9 from Monsvold, who were the starters and all that. Chuck Robinson, Nick Witherspoon, Jimmy Jones, Glenn Haskins, Kevin Creevy. Bench. Boston, 30 points from Havlicek, Dave Cowens, JoJo White, Charlie Scott, and Paul Silas, future NBA head coach, was on that roster. Kevin Stakem, Glenn McDonald, who was a hero in that triple overtime game 3, won by the Celtics. Jim Ard, Tom Boswell, Don Nelson, yes, that Don Nelson, future coach, and Steve Kapersky. Game 2 saw the Bullets dip at 103-103. So the Celtics thought they were going to win. But 22 from Hayes, 20 from Bing. It was close, though. The Bullets win 104-103. Nick Witherspoon scored 10 off the bench. There's Tom Clasco. Steve Kapersky and Don Nelson. Mm-hmm. So 1-1 headed back to Washington. And it would be Boston crushing at Dave Cowens, 21 points, 17 rebounds. JoJo White also had 21 points. Jerome Anderson and Ed Searcy also played. Let's see, Coselico and Tom Kropp. 21 points from Elvin, 21 from Chenier. Wes Unseld only had 4 points. He only attempted 4 field goals. I don't know why. Game 4 sees the Bullets win 106-98. Chenier press up 24 points, so that makes it 2-2. Silas put up 23, Havlicek 20. The bench, Ed Searcy scored 6 points in 1 minute. Why did they not put him in for the rest of the game? Bullets 24 from Hayes, 24 from Chenier. Dave Bing put up 18. So at 2-2, they head back to Boston. And Game 5 sees the Bullets pull off the upset in Game 5, 90-87. Elvin Hayes, 5 blocks. The Big E was hoping for something. 22 points from Bing, 15 from Hayes, 15 from Riordan. Bench not really much. 16 from JoJo, 14 from Cowens, 13 from Havlicek. Statham got 11 points in 16 minutes on the bench. Balsadas only had 8 total. So, is this it? The answer is yes, it is. As Wes Unseld remembered who the heck he was. And the Celtics choke it in Game 6 as the Bullets win Game 6. And now we'll face the Suns in the championship. Georgia Wade put up 25 points. Cersei put up 12 points in 3 minutes. Why the heck? Yeah, 3-pointers. Well, I know they weren't around in 1976, but yeah, he put up 4 3-pointers and still wasn't enough. 24 from Bing, 23 from Hayes. The bench was okay. So yeah, the Celtics are eliminated. Rochester Rules. Rochester Rules, yes, sir. So the Bullets put up 48 wins. The Suns got through with only 42 wins and won the West. So Washington would have home court. I say home field. Game 1, Washington crushed Phoenix 115-79 as Wes Unseld put up 14.17 rebounds. Gar Hurd, Paul Westphal, Alvin Adams, Ricky Silvers, and Keith Erickson are your starters. The bench, Dick Van Arsdale, great player. Dennis Autry, Chris Perry, Pat Riley. Yes, that Pat Riley. Phil Lumpkin, John Wetzel, Fred Saunders, Mike Batum, Nate Hoffler, and John Shoemake. Notre Dame guy. Washington 26 from Junior, 17 from Bing. The other guys didn't play. Triple Robinson. Game 2 sees the Suns falter to Unselt's double-double, 121-10. So Washington looks pretty impressive. 26 from Adams, 25 from Westphal for Phoenix, but in the end, they can do anything. 23 from Hayes, 25 from Bing. Witherspoon and Jones got 10 points off the bench. Off to Phoenix. Game 3 sees the Suns actually win. Alvin Adams, 24 points, 11 rebounds. Hayes put up 24, Chenier 23. So the Bullets lose the game to the Suns as Adams did put up 24. Armstead got 15 points off the bench over Sobers and Erickson. Game 4 sees the Bullets prove themselves. 27 from Chenier, 127-107. As of course, 27 points from Chenier. Everyone scored 10 points as a bench player. Alignment, Witherspoon, Robinson, and Greavy with double digits. Crop and Kosoko. Everyone for Phoenix scored at least 10 points. Pat Riley even got 9. Anyway, we do the 2-3-2 system. And in the end, it was the Suns winning 108-95 to force at least game 6. Alvin Adams, 22 points, 10 rebounds. Chenier put up 22, Hayes 20, trying to close it out. They don't. 22 from Alvin Adams. So 11. So that's what they do. And then game 6 in Washington sees the team win 95-88. West Suns sold 20 rebounds, and Washington does take out the Suns in 6. Win the match, and then they would have won the championship finally. 24 from Westfall, 10 from Firemarto. Being with 20, Elvin Hayes with 18. Game set match as the Washington Bullets took it all for you. Hey, I'm Jeff Diamond Adu.